We were sitting in the car after dinner. She said, "My ex's was bigger than yours. I think we can't be together." I nodded, unlocked the door, and told her to finish the sentence outside. We were sitting in the car outside the restaurant when she said it. The heater hummed, rain tapped on the windshield, and for a moment everything was ordinary. Then Mira leaned back, crossed her legs, and spoke the sentence that split my life clean in two. We had just finished dinner at a quiet Italian place near the pier. It was supposed to be a calm night, nothing special, just wine, laughter, and an easy drive home. I'd been planning to meet her parents next week, even bought a shirt I didn't hate for the occasion. She'd been distracted all night, though, flipping her phone face down every time I glanced at it. Still, I didn't press. You learn with Mira that pressing means drama, and drama always ends with her pretending to cry in public while everyone looks at me like the villain. So I let her talk. About work. About her friend's wedding. About how her ex, Jordan, got a new car that probably suits him better than commitment. I nodded, smiled where I had to, waited for the check, and thought maybe we'd make it through the night without a spark. Then, in the quiet of the parked car, she decided to start a fire. She turned to me, serious but rehearsed, like she'd been practicing it. "You know, Caleb," she said, "I've been thinking. My ex's was bigger than yours. I just don't think we can be together." I didn't respond right away. The windshield wipers dragged across glass in slow rhythm. A streetlight flickered against her face. She waited for my reaction, for the outburst, the insult, the desperate question. Mira always needed a reaction. She fed on it. Silence unsettled her more than anger ever could. I unlocked the door. She frowned. "What are you doing?" I kept my hand on the steering wheel, eyes forward. "If you're going to finish that sentence, do it outside." Her lips parted, confused, maybe even frightened for a second. I could almost hear her mind scrambling for the script. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I wasn't supposed to stay calm. She was supposed to have the power. The rain outside had softened to mist. I watched her hesitate, fingers hovering near the door handle. "You're seriously kicking me out right now?" she asked, voice shaky. I didn't say a word, just leaned over, pushed the lock open, and waited. She laughed then, that kind of laugh people use when they want to pretend they're still in control. "You're ridiculous," she said, grabbing her purse. She stepped out into the drizzle, muttering something about immaturity, but her tone had lost its edge. She stood there, half under the streetlight, half in shadow, arms folded tight. I rolled down the window just enough for her to hear me. "You wanted honesty. Now you have it. You can walk home with it." Then I drove away. I didn't speed or slam the wheel. I didn't even look back in the mirror. I just drove, slow and steady, until the restaurant lights disappeared behind me. The quiet inside the car was almost peaceful. For the first time in months, I felt clear. When I got home, her messages were already piling up. At first, they were taunts. "You're overreacting. Can't you take a joke?" Then they turned pleading. "I didn't mean it like that. Please call me." By midnight, she had called 11 times. I silenced my phone and went to bed. The next morning, my coworker Luis asked why I looked like I hadn't slept. I just said, "Long night," and poured more coffee. I wasn't about to explain that my relationship had ended because of a 6-word sentence about anatomy. It sounded absurd out loud, but the absurdity made it perfect. You can measure a person by the kind of wound they try to inflict. Mira went for humiliation because it was the only weapon she had left. 2 days passed before she showed up at my work site. I was overseeing a renovation project on a lake house, standing on the porch when her car pulled in. She stepped out wearing a coat too thin for the weather, her hair pulled back, her smile polished like a mirror. "Can we talk?" she asked. I looked at the workers nearby and said, "Not here." She followed me to the edge of the property where the gravel met the mud. "I was drunk," she started. I said something stupid. "You know how I get when I'm upset." I didn't answer. She went on. "I just wanted to get your attention. You've been distant lately. I was trying to make you feel something." "You did," I said. "Just not what you wanted." That hit her. I could see it. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I miss you, Caleb. Can't we just forget that night?" I shook my head. "You wanted to end it. I just helped you finish the sentence." She stared at me, like I'd said something she didn't recognize. That was always her problem. She could throw stones, but she never imagined one could be thrown back. Before she left, she muttered, "You'll regret this." Maybe. But that moment felt like air after months underwater. That evening, Luis invited me to his neighborhood barbecue that weekend. "Bring Mira," he joked. I told him I'd be coming alone. He nodded, understanding without asking. When Saturday came, I went. It was small, grill smoke, music, people talking about ordinary things. The simplicity was refreshing. Around sunset, I saw Myra's car parked across the street. She was leaning against the hood, pretending to check her phone, but her eyes were on me. She hadn't been invited. Luis noticed and whispered, "Is that her?" Yeah, I said. She walked over after a few minutes, pretending it was coincidence. Didn't know you lived around here, she said. Her voice was light, casual, desperate. I don't, I replied. Luis's wife, Anna, came by then, warm, friendly, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. Hey, Caleb, she said. You never told me you were such a good cook. Myra's smile faltered. She lingered for a few seconds, hoping for attention, then walked back to her car. By the time she drove away, half the crowd had seen her standing there awkwardly, waiting for a response that never came. That was the moment I realized something important. Sometimes the cruelest revenge is no revenge at all, just absence. The silence makes people look at themselves. Over the next few weeks, she tried again. Texts from new numbers. Late-night knocks on my door. A note slipped under my windshield wiper that read, "You can't ignore me forever." But I could, and I did. Friends started asking questions. I told them the truth. No gossip, no dramatics. She said something I couldn't forget. I'd say, and leave it at that. People fill in the blanks on their own, and they always imagine worse than what really happened. Eventually, she stopped showing up. The messages slowed, then disappeared. Her name faded from conversations. I focused on work. I helped Luis fix his roof, joined a small volunteer project repainting the local community center, started running again in the mornings. Life became quiet in a way I hadn't realized I'd missed. Every so often, I'd pass the street where I'd left her that night, the one with the flickering streetlight and the wet pavement. I'd wonder if she still thought about it, if she understood that the moment she tried to humiliate me was the moment she handed me freedom. A few months earlier, I would have chased her. I would have apologized for things I hadn't done, just to keep the peace. But sitting there in that car, watching her reach for a knife made of words, I finally saw her clearly. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to make me react, to prove she could still control the tempo of my emotions. And when I refused to play, she had nothing left. The hardest part wasn't leaving her on that street. It was realizing how easy it was once I did. Sometimes I catch myself replaying that night, wondering if I could have handled it with more grace or empathy. But then I remember her face under the streetlight, the confusion, the brief panic when she realized she couldn't pull me back into her performance, and I know I made the right choice. Some people only understand consequences when they echo in silence. That was the start of mine. The thing about silence is that people think it means defeat. But silence can also be a cage, the kind someone builds for themselves when they can't stand not being the center of attention. That's what happened to Mira. 2 weeks passed after the car incident. I didn't block her number, I just muted it. I wanted her to watch the message show delivered, knowing I'd seen it, but chosen not to respond. That small power shift, her waiting instead of me, felt like balance finally being restored. Work filled the gaps easily. I was remodeling a small lake house for a retired couple who treated me like family. Every day ended with a cup of coffee and quiet conversation about anything that wasn't Mira. That was new for me, talking about something that didn't orbit her moods. One Thursday morning, my coworker Luis said he'd seen her at the hardware store. Apparently, she'd asked casual questions about whether I was seeing anyone. He said she looked exhausted, dressed too perfectly for 9 a.m., and seemed desperate for someone to ask why. No one did. That weekend, I joined a small volunteer group repainting the community center. It was full of people I barely knew, local teachers, small business owners, retirees. They didn't care who Mira was. They cared if you showed up and did the work. That simple fact felt like therapy. On the second day of painting, Luis's wife Anna showed up with food for everyone. She had an easy laugh and a habit of talking to strangers like she'd known them forever. When she found out I worked in renovation, she said the town council had been struggling to find someone to fix the leaking roof. I said I'd look at it next week. That small promise opened a door I didn't know I wanted to walk through. Meanwhile, Myra's silence broke. It always did. She sent a long message one evening about how she'd been in a dark place, how she'd only said that thing because she felt neglected. The message ended with, "Can we meet for dinner and talk?" I stared at it for a long time before replying. "I don't think there's anything left to talk about." 10 minutes later she replied, "So you're seeing someone else?" I didn't answer. The next day, my phone buzzed constantly. Missed calls, messages from mutual friends asking what happened. Mira had told them we were working things out, that I was just punishing her. It didn't make me angry. It just confirmed what I already knew. She couldn't survive without a narrative where she was still relevant. At the next community event, Anna teased me for always looking tired. "You need better company," she said. Her tone was playful, not flirty. Still, it caught me off guard how easy it felt to be around someone who didn't need to win every conversation. When she left that day, Luis grinned and said, "You could do worse." For the first time in months, I smiled back. That night, Mira appeared outside my apartment building. I saw her from the window, standing near the entrance, pretending to scroll her phone. She must have waited an hour. I didn't go down. The next morning, she was gone, but there was a note wedged under my windshield. It said, "You used to fight for me. Now you act like I never mattered. Are you really that cold?" I tore it in half and threw it away. What she didn't realize was that this wasn't about coldness. It was about peace. And peace is louder than any apology. A few days later, a message came from her friend Tessa. We'd all known each other for years, though Tessa was firmly in Myra's corner back when things were good. She asked if we could meet for coffee, said she wanted to clear something up. We met at a small cafe near downtown. She looked nervous, like she'd rehearsed something on the drive over. She told me Myra had been telling everyone I was emotionally abusive, that I'd humiliated her and kicked her out of the car for no reason. Tessa said she believed her at first, but had started to see through it. Myra had always twisted stories, but this time it was different. Meaner, sloppier, desperate. "I don't know what happened between you two," Tessa said, "but it's obvious she's spiraling. I just wanted to say I get it now." That simple admission hit harder than any revenge could. For years, Myra had crafted an image of herself as the victim who just loved too much. Watching that illusion crack in someone else's mind was better than any retaliation I could have planned. By the time I left the cafe, Tessa had already texted someone, probably Myra. Later that day, Myra posted a cryptic story on social media about fake friends who turn when you need them most. The irony was almost poetic. At work, I noticed how easy it was to laugh again. Luis played old country music. I teased him about his singing, and we worked until sunset without thinking about who might be watching. That same evening, Anna called about the roof project. "You free tomorrow to check the damage?" she asked. I said yes. When I arrived the next day, she was already there, sleeves rolled up, pointing out leaks. She wasn't helpless about it. She just wanted it done right. Afterward, she insisted on buying me coffee as thanks. We talked about books, travel, the town's history. It wasn't romantic. It was simple and human, and that made it feel like something real for the first time in a long time. Myra must have found out about it because 2 nights later, I came home to find her waiting by my apartment door again. She looked unsteady, wearing one of my old sweatshirts, the one I'd thought she kept after the breakup. "You've replaced me," she said, as if it were an accusation. "I replaced chaos with quiet," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "You think you're better than me now? You think silence makes you noble?" "No," I said. "It just makes you powerless." For a second, I thought she'd slap me. Instead, she stepped back and smiled, a strange, brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll regret this," she said again, the same words as before, but softer this time, more like a wish than a threat. Then she left. That was the last time she came to my door. In the following weeks, her name started vanishing from conversations. Friends who once defended her stopped mentioning her entirely. I found out later that she'd fallen out with Tessa, then with her own brother after borrowing money and not paying it back. Every connection, she had relied on her being the center of something. Once that light went out, people stopped orbiting. Meanwhile, life moved forward. Anna and Luis introduced me to new people, normal people. The kind who talked about music, hiking, or which food truck had the best tacos. I started sleeping better. My phone, once full of Myra's notifications, stayed quiet. The absence wasn't loneliness. It was relief. A month after the car incident, I drove past that same restaurant one night. It was empty except for a couple sitting by the window, laughing over wine. For a second, I felt a pang, not for her, but for the version of myself who thought enduring chaos was the price of love. Now I knew better. You don't fix someone like Myra by understanding them. You fix yourself by walking away before they convince you that silence is cruelty. I parked nearby for a while, just watching the rain fall, and realized I wasn't angry anymore. There's a kind of peace that comes from knowing you don't have to prove anything. That was my revenge. The kind she couldn't post about, couldn't twist, couldn't take away. She had spent years trying to make every moment into a scene, every conflict into an audience. I took that away from her. I stopped reacting, stopped feeding the show, and the whole production collapsed. I drove home that night with the windows down. The air smelled like rain and pine. It wasn't victory I felt, it was distance. The good kind. Sometimes, I caught myself wondering how long she'd keep trying to find someone new to play her game. But that thought didn't stay long. The truth was simple. I didn't care. She'd already lost the one thing that mattered to her most, attention. And for Miravale, that was the cruelest punishment imaginable. By early spring, I had nearly forgotten what it felt like to be angry. The noise that used to follow Mira, calls, drama, damage control, was gone. In its place was a strange quiet that I started to trust. It began subtly, this new rhythm of life. Anna became part of it almost by accident. She was the kind of person who didn't talk about happiness. She just lived it. We'd run into each other at the hardware store, at the community center, or in the cafe downtown. She'd hand me a cup of coffee without asking how I liked it, because she already remembered. There was no performance with her. No emotional games. If she was upset, she said so. If she was tired, she went home. It was steady, honest, boring in the best possible way. A few people noticed. Luis teased me that I smiled more. My mother called one night and said my voice sounded lighter. And yet, under that calm, there was a flicker of unease, the kind that comes when you've been trained to expect explosions after every quiet stretch. The first one arrived sooner than I thought. Mira came back through rumor. It started with a message from a mutual acquaintance. Hey, heard you're seeing Anna. Mira says it's serious. Congrats. The tone was neutral, but the intent wasn't. I hadn't told anyone, which meant Mira was watching again. 2 days later, I overheard someone at the cafe saying Mira had been telling people Anna and I started seeing each other before our breakup. That I had moved on instantly. That Anna wasn't as innocent as she looked. I didn't correct anyone. You can't argue with a ghost. Still, that rumor crawled through my days like static. I caught myself rehearsing explanations in my head, imaginary conversations defending my choices. But every time, I stopped before saying them out loud. I'd promised myself she'd never own my reactions again. One afternoon, as I was locking up the renovation site, I saw a familiar car parked across the street. It was Myra's. She wasn't hiding this time. She was sitting behind the wheel, watching. No expression, no movement, just there. For a moment, I thought about walking over, ending it once and for all. But then I realized that's what she wanted, another scene. Instead, I got in my truck, started the engine, and left without even glancing her way. The next morning, Anna noticed something was off. We were repainting the community center's hallway, and she stopped mid-stroke. You're somewhere else, she said. I told her the truth. I didn't want secrets. I said Mira had been hanging around again, that she was stirring up stories. Anna leaned against the wall, thinking. Doesn't matter what she says, she said finally. People who believe gossip already want. It was such a simple sentence, but it cut through months of noise. Mira had always relied on people reacting. The only way to break her spell was to make her invisible. Over the next few weeks, Anna and I started spending more time together. Coffee after work, a weekend drive, helping Luis's kids build a treehouse. None of it was romantic at first. It just felt easy. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed ease. Then, one Friday night, as we were closing up the community center, Anna said, I've got 2 tickets to the spring gala. They're for donors, but Luis hates crowds. Come with me. The gala was exactly the kind of event Mira used to love. Fancy lighting, fake smiles, and people pretending to network. I almost said no, but something about showing up without apology appealed to me. So I went. Anna looked effortless in a navy dress that didn't try too hard. When we walked in, heads turned. Not because we were dramatic, but because we weren't. Halfway through the night, I saw Mira. She was across the room, in a red dress, laughing too loudly at something a man beside her said. When she saw us, her expression cracked for a fraction of a second before she glued the smile back on. She approached an hour later, when Anna was at the buffet. You move fast, she said, voice sweet but shaking. I move forward, I replied. She tilted her head. You think she's different? Give it time. I hope so, I said. Different is the point. Her mouth opened like she wanted to continue, but the words didn't come. She left with her head high, but her shoulders told the truth. After that night, everything accelerated. The gossip died because people had a new image to hold on to. Anna and me, calm and unbothered. Myra's power was always in chaos. Without it, she was just background noise. But then came the second twist, the one I didn't see coming. Jordan called me. He was the ex, the man Mira compared me to that night in the car. I hadn't spoken to him since, and when his name flashed on my phone, I almost ignored it. But curiosity won. He asked to meet. We met at a diner halfway between our neighborhoods. He looked older, worn out, the kind of tired that comes from chasing the wrong things too long. I heard about the gala, he said first. And Mira. I waited. She reached out to me after, he continued. Said she missed what we had, that she'd been manipulated by you. I almost laughed. And what did you say? He stared into his coffee. I told her she was the one who compared me to you. She didn't like that. Then he looked up, eyes heavy. You know, for a while I thought she'd changed. But then I realized, she doesn't want people, she wants reactions. She texted me 30 times in 2 days. I blocked her yesterday. I didn't gloat. I just nodded. He sighed, half in relief, half in shame. She made me feel crazy, man. Glad you got out. When I left the diner, I realized something strange. The conversation hadn't given me satisfaction. It had given me closure. Jordan wasn't my rival anymore. He was just another person who'd learned the same hard lesson. 2 days later, Anna found out about the meeting. I told her everything. She smiled. You're still untangling her from your life? She said softly. That's good. It means you're almost free. That night, as we walked back to the parking lot, Anna stopped and said, "You know what the difference is between you and her?" "What?" "You get quiet when you're angry. She gets loud. Silence always wins in the end." Her words stayed with me. The next few months blurred into something close to normal. I took on new projects, spent weekends hiking with Anna and friends, even joined a small book club Luis's wife started. People began to see me not as Myra's ex, but as Caleb, the guy who fixes things. Meanwhile, Myra's presence shrank to whispers. Someone mentioned she'd moved back with her mother. Someone else said she was trying to start a blog about toxic relationships. No one seemed interested. But one evening, I got a call from her mother, Irene. Her voice was polite, brittle. She said, "I just wanted to let you know Mira isn't doing well. She's refusing to see anyone. I don't expect you to care, but I thought you should know." I thanked her for telling me, but I didn't ask for details. After I hung up, I sat for a long time thinking about how something can burn itself out completely without anyone needing to pour water on it. The next morning, Anna and I drove to the lake house I'd finished months before. We sat on the dock with coffee and watched the mist lift off the water. She leaned against my shoulder and said, "Do you ever think about her?" "Not really," I said truthfully. "Sometimes, but not like before." "What do you think when you do?" I thought about the night in the car, about the streetlight, the rain, her face when she realized I wasn't going to beg. "I think about how quiet it was afterward," I said, "and how that was the best sound I'd heard in years." Anna nodded and smiled faintly. "Then I guess she gave you something after all." She was right. Mira had taught me how to recognize peace by contrast. That night, I deleted the last message thread that still had her name. No ceremony, no bitterness, just gone. By then, even if she'd tried to reach me again, there was nothing left to reach. The war she'd started ended not with one side winning, but with one side walking away while the other stayed behind, shouting into a silence that no longer answered. And that silence was mine. By summer, the silence around Mira had turned into something else entirely: absence. She wasn't part of the background noise anymore. Even her name felt distant, like a word from a language I used to speak, but had forgotten. I didn't realize how complete that absence was until Irene called again. It was a hot evening. Anna and I had spent the day helping Luis's kids with a backyard project, and the phone rang while I was locking up my truck. Irene's voice was careful, polite in the way people sound when they're trying not to ask for too much. She said Mira had moved back in with her 2 months ago, that she was trying to rebuild. I could hear exhaustion in every word. "She's been different," Irene said. Quiet, withdrawn. "I think she wants to talk to you. Just once." I leaned against the truck, watching the sun dip behind the roofs. "I don't think that would help either of us," I said gently. "I thought you might say that," she replied, almost relieved. Then, after a pause, she added, "For what it's worth, you did the right thing." That sentence stuck with me long after the call ended. Parents rarely admit when their children are the ones who broke something. For Irene to say that meant Myra's world had truly shrunk. I told Anna about the call that night. She listened quietly, then said, "You don't owe anyone a conversation with your past." She was right. I didn't. Weeks passed. Work stayed steady, and so did life. But somewhere beneath the calm, I could feel an ending approaching. The kind that doesn't explode but sinks slowly, like a ship disappearing below the horizon. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday. Luis handed me the day's mail, a small padded envelope with no return address. Inside was my old house key and a folded note. The handwriting was unmistakable. "You win." That was all it said. The words didn't sting. They just left an echo. It was strange to see her handwriting again. Neat, practiced, confident even in surrender. For a moment, I wondered if she was saying it spitefully or if it was genuine acceptance. But then I realized it didn't matter. Victory wasn't the point. I didn't tell anyone about the note. I kept it in a drawer for a week, then threw it away. A few days later, Irene called once more, this time to tell me Mira had left town for a recovery program. "She wanted me to let you know she's not running away," Irene said. "She's trying to fix what's left." I told her I wished them both peace. And I meant it. After that, the silence returned and stayed. Life with Anna deepened in the way calm things do. No fireworks, no declarations, just quiet certainty. We spent weekends driving along the coast, stopping at small diners, laughing about things that didn't matter. I could finally trust happiness again, not as a performance, but as a habit. Sometimes, though, late at night, I'd think about Myra's note. "You win." I wasn't sure what winning meant anymore. I hadn't destroyed her, hadn't humiliated her, hadn't even really fought. I had simply stopped showing up to the battlefield. Maybe that's what victory is, being the first to walk away and never look back. A year passed like that. Then came the final twist. Anna and I were at the farmer's market when Luis showed me something on his phone. It was a link to a blog post. The author's name wasn't listed, but the writing was unmistakable. The entry was titled, "When the Spotlight Burns Out." It was Mira. The post wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea for attention either. It was raw, unnervingly honest. She wrote about how she'd spent her whole life mistaking control for connection, about how humiliation was her way of proving she could still make people feel something. And she mentioned me, but not by name. She wrote, "There was one man who didn't yell, didn't fight, didn't even look back. I thought silence meant weakness. I didn't realize it was the first boundary anyone had ever set for me. For a long time, I just stared at that line." Anna read it too. She didn't say anything at first, just rested her head on my shoulder. Eventually she said, "I think that's her way of letting go." Maybe it was. The post went semi-viral for a week, shared mostly in self-help forums and quiet corners of the internet, where people talked about toxic behavior without judgment. For once, Mira wasn't the villain or the victim. She was just a person trying to understand why she kept burning her own life down. She never wrote another entry after that one. Months later, Irene sent a short message saying Mira had found work at a small nonprofit out of state. "She's doing better," she said. "Not perfect, but better. She doesn't talk about you anymore, and that's a good sign." I didn't respond right away. I stared out the window for a while, then typed back, "I'm glad." Because I was. That night, I took the old car out for one last drive. The same one where everything had ended. I'd kept it all this time, not because I was sentimental, but because I couldn't quite bring myself to get rid of it. Maybe I needed to know I could sit in it without feeling anything. I parked in the same spot outside that Italian restaurant. The streetlight still flickered. The restaurant had been remodeled, new sign, same smell of garlic and wet pavement. I turned off the engine and sat there in silence. I thought about the man I'd been that night, tired, uncertain, trying too hard to reason with someone who thrived on chaos. And I thought about the man I'd become, still imperfect, still figuring things out, but no longer afraid of walking away. For the first time, I realized Mira hadn't really taken anything from me. She just forced me to learn how to protect the parts of myself I used to give away too easily. When I got home, Anna was on the porch with 2 mugs of tea. She smiled and asked, "You went there, didn't you?" "Yeah." "How did it feel?" "Quiet," I said. "The good kind." She nodded and handed me the tea. "Then it's done." We sat there in the fading light. No music, no talking, just the soft hum of evenings settling over everything. Sometimes revenge looks like winning. Sometimes it looks like someone else losing. But the best kind, the kind that doesn't rot you from the inside, just looks like peace. That night, I finally threw away the car keys. Years later, I'd hear fragments about Mira now and then. A coworker who knew someone at her new job said she was doing volunteer counseling for people recovering from emotional trauma. Apparently, she was good at it, empathetic, patient, calm. Maybe she'd finally learned how to give what she'd always tried to steal, attention without expectation. I never reached out. She never tried again either. Some stories end not with an explosion, but with 2 people finally learning to stay out of each other's weather systems. One evening, while closing up a new renovation project, I found an old notebook in the toolbox. Inside were notes from 2 years ago, measurements, sketches, and a list titled Plans for the Future. At the bottom, in handwriting I barely recognized, I'd written, "Stop fixing people who don't want to be repaired." It made me smile. That sentence had aged well. The next morning, Anna and I drove to the coast before sunrise. We sat on the sand, watching the water glow pink under the first light. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I thought about how strange it was that all of this, the chaos, the silence, the healing, had started in a car over one cruel sentence. Mira had meant to break me with it. Instead, she gave me a reason to rebuild. And in the end, maybe that was the real win neither of us had planned for.